Rebecca didn't mention a book. That's because I don't have one. This left me with a conundrum. I could talk about any privacy topic. So what I felt would be most useful for me to share with you today is online tracking and how companies are tracking us online when we browse and what concrete steps you can take about it. So let me show you this cartoon. Do you remember this and the famous tagline that went with this? On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. That was the early innocent days of the internet. Makes you feel nostalgic, doesn't it? Can you imagine what it would sound like if that cartoon were published today? It would probably, I'm guessing, be something like, it's the internet. Of course they know you're a dog. They also know your favorite brand of pet food and the name of the cute poodle at the park that you have a crush on. Right? So this is the reality that we live in today, and this is what I want to talk to you about. I want to give you bad news and good news. The bad news is that we live in a world with exploding complexity of online tracking. I have a team of graduate and undergraduate students in Princeton that I'm working with, where I'm a professor, and we're reverse engineering what companies are doing online in terms of tracking us and with our personal data, and I can only describe our feelings as morbid fascination. But I also want to give you good news. It's not a message of doom and gloom. You have a lot of power in this situation. There are a lot of things you can do, and I want to share that with you as well. So what I want to talk about specifically when I talk about online tracking is what I call third-party online tracking, which I consider the most insidious form of online tracking, where sites other than the one you're visiting, that are typically invisible, you don't even see them, are collecting profiles or dossiers of your browsing history. You might wonder, how can this even happen? How can the sites other than the one I'm visiting see me? Let me show you a screenshot. This is from a definitive Stanford study of online tracking a year or two ago. This is of the New York Times, and you'll see in this picture how many areas are highlighted in red, and these are all content that's being served by sites other than the New York Times. And when this happens, your browser connects to a bunch of other sites, 7 that you can see in this picture, and lots more that are concealed, that are invisible. And all of these other sites now know that you visited the New York Times, and then whatever other sites you visited, and that's how they compile dossiers on you. One study revealed that on the average top 50 website, there are 64 independent tracking mechanisms. And so just to drive home this point of how subtle these trackers can be, let me show you the screenshot. So let me show you what some of these different third parties can be that are tracking you. It could be Facebook and Google. It could be well-known companies. It could be companies that you've probably never heard of, BlueKai, RevSci.net. There's one tracker that we found in our database which is very prominent, 112.207.net. Do you remember visiting 112.207.net recently? And yet you probably did, and they remember you because they're in the business of remembering you. Right? So here's a screenshot of the UK's National Health Service, and you're looking at their syphilis page. A lot of really good information, but what I wanted to point you to is there is a Facebook like button on there, and 5 people have clicked it. I don't know, I guess I'm missing out. But joking aside, the scary part here is not that 5 people have clicked it, but that hundreds of thousands of people who visited this page and other very sensitive pages like it were not at all aware that there was a Facebook tracker on this page, and that Facebook is watching what they browse online. And of course, Facebook typically has your identity, knows who you are, because you've left your browser logged into Facebook, right, like most of us do. So if that hasn't convinced you, and the fact there are so many invisible trackers, let me very quickly summarize why one might want to worry about this kind of online tracking. Well, there is just basically our intellectual privacy, because studies have shown that people behave differently when you know that there are hundreds of people watching what you do, right? That's an important freedom to protect. There is also behavioral profiling and targeting. You may have seen the headline last year, how Target knows that a teenage girl was pregnant before her dad did, right? So that's the level of targeting and profiling that this data can reveal about you. There is also preliminary evidence that browsing histories are being used for price discrimination. Now, you might be the type of person that says, I don't care about any of this. The only thing I care about is being safe from the government. Tell me about the NSA. That's the only kind of privacy leak that worries me. Well, I've got news for you. In the recent NSA leaks, it was revealed that one of the things they're using to track you is double-click tracking cookies. So these third-party online tracking companies are doing the NSA's work for them. Right. So scary stuff, but let's pause for a moment. I've been working in researching the online tracking space for about 4 years now. And let me share with you some of the things I've found in terms of what works and what doesn't work in terms of how you can protect yourself. One piece of good news is that something that does work is public opinion. This might seem tautological, but a lot of these companies really care if there is a privacy backlash. And there have been numerous instances of products being shut down, even entire companies being shut down, because there was a backlash and because people didn't like it. You might remember Google Buzz. Let me give you an example that's more closely related to third-party online tracking that we've been talking about. There was this feature called Facebook Instant Personalization. I consider this probably the most privacy intrusive feature that Facebook has ever released. The point of Facebook Instant Personalization is that whenever you go to some other site, that site and Facebook talk silently in the background, and Facebook tells them who you are and various things about you, like your location or what movies you like or whatever. Many privacy experts complained about this. I'm happy to say that I had a role in this, and organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who we've heard about several times already today, picked up this cause. And because of that, Facebook limited it to a very preliminary beta rollout, and this is fortunately not happening today. The internet could be a much worse place for privacy if some of these things had been allowed to happen. So public opinion did work, and we're not living in the reality of Facebook instant personalization. That's one piece of good news. On the other hand, here's something that doesn't work. Efforts for privacy advocates and tracking companies to sit down at the table together, in my experience, don't seem to have worked. Let me tell you the story of Do Not Track. If you read that little blurb about me, it'll say that I'm one of the researchers behind the Do Not Track proposal. Right? So what this was advertising companies and tracking companies saying, hey, if you're worried about tracking, we let you opt out. And we're OK with that because we believe that most people will be convinced of the advantages of tracking and will not opt out. We said, but look, there are hundreds of tracking companies. It's completely unfeasible to expect anyone to opt out individually. Let's make a browser setting so that the browser can help you opt out of all of those sites at once. And browser vendors got on board with this. This setting is in every browser today. If you look at Firefox in the privacy tab, that's the very first privacy setting. It's called Do Not Track. Every single browser has it. What happened? There have been 2 years of constant negotiations of just what Do Not Track means and what tracking companies are obligated to do and not obligated to do. And as of a week or two ago, everybody's finally agreed that these negotiations are going nowhere. Right? So this idea of, oh, let's all be on the same page and let's talk about it together, that hasn't really worked out. And I would say, even though I invested a lot of time in it, as did so many others, that for Do Not Track, it's time to move on. We're in a world where the interests of these tracking companies and the interests of consumers are fundamentally a little bit misaligned. And I'm OK with that. We tried, but it didn't work to bring everybody to the table on the same page. So I want to tell you that there are a bunch of these blocking tools for online tracking, and these blocking tools work really, really well. AdBlock Plus and Ghosttree are a couple of examples that I use. There are more, and I'll tell you a little bit more about these. These are typically browser add-ons that you can employ. Now, when I tell people about blocking tools, one of the things that they say is, oh, this is not a good solution for me because there are new privacy intrusions all the time, so I have to go and find out and change those settings again, or I have to install yet another blocking tool and so on. Well, here's my answer to that. Here's how I solve that problem. I'm not necessarily on top of all of the privacy intrusions that are going on. Here's what I do. There are a lot of organizations that are in the business of staying on top of this and telling you about them. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is one of them. There is a privacy company called Abind that I like. These are just a few examples. There are others, right? So one of the things you can do that's very powerful is just get on the Twitter feed or the RSS feed of these organizations that are in the business of always knowing whenever there is a new privacy intrusion and telling you in very simple steps what you have to install or what setting you have to change. And that is a method that I think can work for most people. In other words, to put it differently, online privacy, the price of online privacy is eternal vigilance. But what Jefferson didn't know and what we have today is that this eternal vigilance is a problem that has been solved by technology. Right? People give up when they hear, oh, you have to keep changing your privacy settings all the time. But I have been doing that, and I have been teaching people to do that, and it's not hard at all. All you have to do is set aside maybe an hour or two of a budget per month to stay on top of this, or get on the newsfeed of organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation. That's a very simple, easily applicable tool that everybody can use. Now, in my years of research in this, one other point that's come out is that people say, oh, this is going to get into an arms race. I say, if it's an arms race, bring it on. That's not a problem. The balance of power here is with consumers. And let me give you a very quick example of why. This is kind of because of a legal nuance, the example that I'm going to give you. Safari had a feature to block third-party cookies, which is one of the tools that you can make use of. It's turned on by default. Now, Google, in one of their tracking features, was to circumvent this tracking protection by Safari. Here's what happened. An independent researcher found this out, who I'm going to show you in a second. And because of that, the Federal Trade Commission was able to swoop in and say, this is a circumvention of an existing privacy tool. And so Google was slapped with a huge fine, and they've backed off of that now. So if it gets into an arms race, there are legal mechanisms to protect against that, such as the Federal Trade Commission. And so an arms race is nothing to worry about. So go ahead, be comfortable in installing those privacy tools and protect yourself. So just very quickly, a success story is that reverse engineering by independent researchers has helped a lot in revealing the state of online tracking. And these are a couple of guys who have been sort of heroes of this new wave of research. And my own research at Princeton has been inspired by the success that they've had. So let me summarize the 3 takeaways that I have for you in sort of increasing order of importance. The first one is to support privacy groups, because it is through these groups like the EFF and the CDT and ACLU that a lot of these good tools or news about what to do about privacy comes to us. And the second one is going to be to voice your concerns to companies and regulators, because we've seen time and again that public opinion has been a powerful force for companies to change their privacy policies. And the third the first and the most important one is that these blocking tools, like browser add-ons and blocking cookies, they really work, so make use of them. The only caveat here is that you have to pick the right tools and you have to stay updated. Yes, it involves a little bit of effort. But as I've told you, even though the price of privacy is eternal vigilance, that's not too hard, because it's a solved technology problem. Get on Twitter, get on RSS feeds, follow some of these privacy news feeds, and that will almost take care of the problem for you. You won't feel like you're drowning anymore. You'll feel like you're in control, because you'll find out about things as soon as they happen, and you'll know how to protect yourself. I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you for your time.